Dale Chihuly's glass artwork is stunning, often massive, and sometimes baffling.
How did he make this? And how did he put 1,000 glass pieces together on an outside sculpture? They don't break or whatever. I was wowed by a lot of the pieces.
Jan Greenberg first had those thoughts in 2006 when these Chihuly art pieces were installed as part of an exhibition at the Missouri Botanical Garden in St. Louis. It took 14 years, but she's finally able to share some answers to her questions in her latest children's book, World of Glass, The Art of Dale Chihuly. She and co-author Sandra Jordan spent 3 days in Washington at the Pilchuck Glass School Chihuly founded, and Boathouse Hot Shop, where they interviewed the art innovator, who told them he's never met a color he didn't like. Those vibrant colors are on full display in this beautiful book, the 14th by the best-selling team on art and artists. It all started 40 years ago when this New York editor noticed this St. Louisan's novel in a slush pile.
A slush pile is all the unsolicited manuscripts, and editors go through them to see if there's some sort of kernel of something, and so she liked the story, and that's where we first met.
From there, the team expanded to writing more on what they knew.
It was art, because my husband is an art dealer, and there were artists in and out of the house, and there were no books for young people about art. So I thought, it's a gap in the bookshelf. It's time to fill it.
Their award-winning books didn't just fill that space, it opened up a whole new world to children. We talked with Greenberg about what makes their stories on artists special for kids.
It is really that mingling of the life and the work that interests us in writing a book.
Writing solo versus writing as a team.
I do think, in our case, two heads are better than one.
And Dale Chihuly's inspiring artwork and story.
He had an image that he did not want to just see his work in museums. He wanted to get it out in the gardens, in the public parks, in the street corners, and he wanted his art to be inclusive for people to enjoy.
Jan Greenberg, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, and thank you to the St. Louis County Libraries. This is really a treat for me.
Your books, you write about a lot of contemporary artists, all kinds of them. But what I love about them is in your writing, you can see your intrigue and curiosity and your love for the arts. Where did that start from? Was that put into you as a child, or where did that all come from?
My mother was a career person. She was head of a department store. It was called Sonnenfeld's, and it was downtown. And so she used to take me on weekends, and I'd sit and draw in the advertising department and listen to the discussion. But she also took me to museums. I was creative. I was writing all the time growing up, and mostly reading. So I think those things just carried over. I never thought that I had a gift for writing, because I thought if I could do it, anybody could. So, it was later when I had stories to tell.
These ideas that you came up with, you've really focused on more contemporary artists. Why is that?
Because there were no books for young people on contemporary artists, really. So we started first with just writing books about looking at painting or looking at sculpture, or essays about individual artists in the 20th century. And we became fascinated by the stories they would tell us about their childhoods. And we thought they're all, as adults, influenced by what they saw and what they did as young people. We thought let's focus on one artist. And the first one was one that wasn't a household name, Chuck Close, but he was an artist who had a story. He had a really poignant story. And, now he's been shown in every museum all over the world. He's a great man. He had an accident when he was in the height of his career and was paralyzed from the neck down, and he learned to make art in a different way. And he's very, very generous about young artists. And so it was a good story. And that has to be part of it, too.
Well, I'm hearing Dale Chihuly makes sense now because I'm hearing lots of pieces that kind of follow in that vein.
It was so much fun doing the Chihuly book. It really was, because number one, we got to go out to Seattle, and they showed us around. They did everything and to welcome us and to his world, which is where we got the title, World of Glass, because he has this very special world out in Seattle with glass blowing. He's one of the most innovative people in the glass arts in the world. And you'll read in the book that he had a car accident, and he wears a black patch over his eye, but the truth is that he went blind in one eye because of the accident and eventually had to stop glass blowing. But he became so good at working with other people and teaching them, and he was still creating. He'd do drawings, and they would take it from there. And the book is good in terms of talking about process. We've always been interested in showing young people that there is a process and that artists have to learn their skills and be able to communicate.
That you mentioned, too, that there are struggles, and you point out these struggles. I mean, he lost his dad and his brother pretty close together. Then his fame is going right on up, and then he has this accident, and then he can't blow glass. And then you even talk about his struggles with bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you feel it's important? I mean, the book is about art.
Right.
But then underlying is this message of, keep going.
Well, I've always been interested when I read a biography, if there's a struggle, if the subject has to overcome and be challenged and overcomes. So for me, that every artist that we write about has had that struggle, and certainly Dale Chihuly did, but he is the most amazing person, wonderful personality, his staff, everybody that works for him. It's a huge group.
Going back to the seed that started this idea, I mean, you first had this idea way back in 2006 when he had that big installation at the Missouri Botanical Garden, right?
Yes. Sandra and I went to see it because we were working on a book, and she used to come to St. Louis where it was quiet. She lives in New York. Or I'd go to New York, and we would go back and forth, and those were always great times because we'd have field trips. We'd be working, and then we'd have a little field trip, and that was to the Botanical Garden, and we're looking around at this show where there was glass works, big sculptures and smaller pieces, and it was the place was filled with light and color because the work really responds to nature and the light. And I said, it would be fun to write about Dale Chihuly because we've written about painters and sculptors and ceramic artists, but we have never done this. And he is the one artist who has worked on showing that what we thought of as craft, ceramics, basket weaving, glass blowing, he's merged the process, the work. So more than any other artist, I think he has shown the world that using glass as a medium, just like an artist might use paint or found objects or sculptural cardboard or whatever, glass is a medium to make art.
That installation was in 2006.
Right.
So that
what
was
happened?
14 years ago.
Well, we had other projects we were doing, but also it took a while for him to choose who he wanted to do a children's book. He actually liked the book on Frank Gehry, the architect, and he wanted a book that would be more middle grade, upper elementary. And we, thought the age group was good, and then we could tell the stories and be honest about his problems with bipolar or the accident or whatever, that kids should know that. And we didn't want to push anything under the carpet.
So you have all this buildup, and then you get to go out there and meet him, and you get to interview him, right?
Yes, that's part of the process for us. If we're going to do a book on a living artist, we want to meet her or him.
Yeah.
And we've been lucky to be able to do that.
So how did you prepare for this interview, that you've been thinking about for years?
By that time, he had sent both of us 2 cartons of all the books that they'd produced. So there we were with all this information. We didn't have to go anywhere. And he sent the same to her as he did to me. So we had all these books. And so just as an example, I wanted to show you, this was one of the books. We would go through some of the books and we would mark the places where we saw an artwork or a picture of him and his crew. All the books have markers in them because we had to go back and choose the pictures. And it was part of that whole business. I mean, we used his images and the photography from his studio or from a number of different photographers, I think is wonderful.
Yeah.
Made the book more beautiful.
Oh, sure. What was your biggest takeaway? And maybe you have one from Pilchuck and from his boathouse where he does his glass blowing. What was your biggest takeaway from that experience?
That he is the maestro. He is, even without blowing glass anymore, he is totally in the process. And everyone around him wants to please him and wants to do it the way he sees it. And so there's all this intermingling of very talented people who are handpicked by him and also who are passionate about glass blowing.
When you were there, I know you witnessed the glass blowing. Did you try to blow glass?
No, I did not try. Sandra wanted to, but for me it looked completely confusing, completely dangerous, but gorgeous and wonderful to watch. And I was glad I was there. We had a couple of days of just watching. It's such a fascinating process. But he claims that once you've discovered glass blowing, you'll never want to do anything else.
Because I know for some of your other books that you often try the medium that you're
do.
Right? Because wasn't it with...
it's easier for me with drawing and painting.
Sure. Because even with the pottery, right? When you did the pottery,
Yes.
that really made you appreciate George Orr, right?
Exactly. Because I tried and every time I would make a pot, it would collapse. I thought, this is a skill. You have to work at this one.
Was there something that you learned there that you thought, wow, I didn't expect that, or this definitely has to be in the book after that experience in Seattle?
I think that it was seeing the work that was being done and the admiration people that work at the studio have for him. I didn't think about that before I went, but it's a very human, personal, and wonderful communication they all have with each other and how it's all centered around the artist.
So when he's there, because he's not blowing the glass, and I've seen some video of him, but he is like right there in the mix kind of directing.
Yes,
Is that how you would...
Well, he's doing drawings, and the drawings are transferred onto the work so that the work and he tells them, he gives them instructions. He's always encouraging to stretch, blow it longer, make it bigger, and use that color. Or there are all kinds of techniques that he's invented that make the glass so beautiful and so unusual. And I think a lot of glass blowers around the country have looked up to him for what he's been able to create.
You notice that in doing these books on different artists, that there's always something about their childhood that had that impact on them, that they always remembered. That's, with Dale Chihuly, it was all the colors that his mother had. That
in the garden, yes.
In the garden, that he remembered and had that really huge impact on what he would do in his future life. I mean, these are books for kids. Are you hoping that they see that, what you love now, you can do something with? Is there a message there?
I mean, we want to inspire them, but we also want to entertain and tell a good story. For young people, being experimental, taking risks, and that's what every artist that we've written about has had to do. And also, you can follow your dreams. And I think that was important for us to share with young people because it's the passion toward wanting to do something and make it work.
So let's talk more about this writing process. So you come back from Seattle, you've got all this stuff, and his marketing team and publication team, they just keep sending you things. So I've read somewhere that when you are writing about an artist, that you kind of surround yourself with all these things. Is that for better? I think you said once that your husband comes in and thinks, oh my goodness, because there's just stuff everywhere. Is that
He's so
true?
happy that I have a studio or an office on the third floor.
Away from him.
Because there are papers and books and everything everywhere. And I've noticed it's the same at Sandra's house. She has one great big table, and it seems to have piles of things everywhere. But she knows where everything is, and so I know where everything is in my study. Although I think right now it could use a little bit of brightening up and straightening up.
Do you do that with each one, though? You just surround yourself, and then when you move to the
Well,
next
you
one?
have to. The way we do it is we assign each other different chapters. Then we pass it back and forth, and sometimes when a book is finished, we can't tell who wrote what, when, because we're both passing it back and forth and talking about it, and you can't be married to your words. You have to be able to compromise sometimes. We don't always agree. We agree to disagree sometimes. But that's part of making the book the best we can.
Is that how you generally do it? You each get different chapters, you
Mm-hmm.
assign them, and then you edit each other's?
We first talk about the whole concept of the book. We try and find the voice. And the voice will really set the pattern of how the book is going to go, because some of the picture books like Ballet for Martha or Action Jackson, which are both illustrated and about a particular time in the artist's life, those books we wanted a little more lyrical, poetic form. I think that each book is very different, but we really are trying to tell the story.
But you feel that it's better as a collaboration than if you try to do it on your own?
Yes, I do. I think the books have definitely grown from having our 2 points of view and our interests. We both have to be interested in the artist. We're not going to do a book on an artist. Even if she loves the artist and I don't, we're not going to do that book. So I do think, yeah, in our case, two heads are better than one. But both of us have done books on our own, too.
Yeah.
So, it's not that every book we do together. So she's written a book about a Christmas tree farm, and I edited a book on poetry about art. So there's a lot of time to do individual work.
You have that love for poetry and for art. So you kind of combine those two things, and you have two books, the Heart to Heart and Side by Side. You had some challenges when it came to both of those books, right? Heart to Heart.
Well, Heart to Heart was written before you could send an email.
Right.
So every poet I wanted to have do the book, I would have to find their addresses and send them a letter and then wait and back and forth. And really, I wanted the book to be original, new poems about 20th century art. And I had a list of the artists that I was interested in seeing them pick, because I didn't want it to be, their Aunt Sophie's Sunday, hobby.
Right.
And so the book was wonderful, and it's still in print, and teachers enjoy it, and I think young people do too. And so it just keeps influencing teachers and kids about looking at art and writing a poem and thinking about it in a different way.
I'm thinking about all these people that you've reached out to who've said yes to you, really influential people. Do you get no very often?
I don't think so.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think everybody wants to first of all, we're not trying to be judgmental. We're not writing a book that interprets the work. we're writing a book that'll tell their story to young people. So we really have never had anyone that I can remember ignore us. But for the poetry book, I would be getting letters after the book was in print or after the book was in production from a poet who would say, oh, you know, I just found this letter in the pile of mail. Can I still send a poem? And I felt badly because some of these poets were really people that I admired a lot. And so I thought, well, you know, it was the hardest one was Side by Side, because that was poets from all over the world and art from all over the world and just translation, and that was really, I think, a challenge.
So then the obvious question is, what's next? Who are you working on next?
You know, I'm kind of in what I call a hiatus. I'm just thinking about things, and I'm not sure that I want to do another book about an artist for a while, just for a while. I want to do some of my own stories.
Maybe not nonfiction?
For my grandchildren, really. So, and it's a funny thing about starting to write an autobiography, which I did with the first novel, is that once I get started, I just love to make up things, and so that it turns into a novel. It's 150 pages, and it's about, you know, my life, but somehow it turns into something else altogether.
Yeah.
That's the fun of it with writing fiction. Nonfiction, you have to stick to the truth. You can't put words in your subject's mouth. You can't interpret in a way that is your opinion. You have to let the book be loyal to the subject. But if you're writing fiction, you can just make up all kinds of things. So, but it's still what they both share is it's still telling a story.
Do you prefer writing one or the other, or do you have...
I've been writing nonfiction for so many years now that getting back into writing fiction has always been in the back of my mind.
In the meantime, whenever she needs a smile, she'll just pick up this book. Dale Chihuly's glass has a mood-altering effect on her, and she encourages everyone to find the art that does the same for them.
They make you feel happy. And I think that's also a good thing, to find books and artworks and music that will give you a way of entering someone else's life and be interesting in terms of your own life. To look at art is to see, especially contemporary art, is to see your own culture in the eyes of someone else who is often speaking about something you don't know about, or often is speaking about something that you can recognize. The arts are what defines the culture. And also it makes us, think about things in a deeper way.